Welcome to the deep dive, where we take complex topics and, well, give you the shortcut to being truly well informed. Today, we're embarking on a pretty fascinating journey into the substance that really powers so much of our modern world: oil.
It's true. It's so easy to take oil for granted, isn't it? We use its products constantly, but its actual story is incredibly rich, full of surprising origins, fundamental concepts that often get overlooked. We're going to peel back those layers today,
Yeah.
really understand what oil is, where it comes from, and how it went from being, just a curiosity to the backbone of global industry.
Yeah, and our guy for this deep dive is the book Oil 101 by Morgan Downey, who's a real expert in commodities. We're focusing on the foundational stuff, let's say, the earlier parts of oil's story. We'll skip the heavy stats for now, aiming for the key insights. So, what's our mission today exactly? What are we trying to unpack?
Okay, our mission is to explore oil right from its ancient history, its kind of surprising early uses. Then we'll get into its basic composition, what actually makes it tick, and then grasp the structure of this massive industry built around it. And finally, look at the really intricate process of how we actually find and get this stuff out of the ground. Let's dive in.
Okay, so most of us think of oil as fuel for cars, planes, modern energy, but it wasn't always seen that way at all. What's really interesting is how its role just completely shifted over the centuries, almost accidentally at first, right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
For centuries, people encountered crude oil. It would seep to the surface, especially in places like the Middle East or ancient China. But they mostly saw it as a nuisance, something sticky and annoying. They might use it for basic things, maybe waterproofing a boat or simple lamps. The Byzantines even used it for Greek fire, but not like a major resource.
So more of an inconvenience than something you'd actively look for?
Precisely. The change really started much later. Think the 1840s. There was a salt mine owner in Pennsylvania, Samuel Keir. He kept finding this oily stuff contaminating his brine wells. Annoying, right? But instead of just ditching it, he saw maybe a commercial angle. He actually bottled it and sold it as Seneca oil or rock oil for like medicinal purposes.
Huh, medicinal. Okay, but that wasn't the big shift, was it? That's where the whales come in.
That's the crucial link. Yeah. Before petroleum really took off, whale oil was king for artificial light, lamps in homes, street lights. But whaling was incredibly intensive, and whale populations were plummeting by the mid-1800s, so whale oil got scarce, expensive. There was this urgent need for a cheaper alternative illuminant,
A gap in the market,
a
basically.
huge gap. And in 1854, this guy George Bissell and some partners had an idea. What if you could distill a good lamp fuel from this nuisance crude oil? They hired a Yale chemistry professor, Benjamin Silliman Jr., and Silliman confirmed it. Yes, you could get kerosene, a clean-burning fuel from crude oil. That was the breakthrough.
Okay, so that discovery, that confirmation, that's what really kicked things off.
Absolutely. It led directly to the first purposeful search for oil, not just finding it by accident. Which brings us to that iconic moment. 1859, Titusville, Pennsylvania. Edwin Drake drills the first well specifically designed to extract oil commercially. That really is the starting gun for the modern oil industry, a total aha moment that sent people scrambling across the globe looking for this stuff.
All right, so we've found it. We know it can be used for lamps. But what is this crude oil exactly? You hear the term all the time, but it sounds like a single substance. The source says it's more complex.
Oh, much more complex,
Yeah.
absolutely. Crude oil isn't one uniform thing. It's a naturally occurring mixture found underground, and it's primarily made up of various hydrocarbons. Think of it like a fingerprint, really. No two crude oils are exactly the same. They vary a lot.
Okay, and that's where this crude oil assay comes in. It's not just jargon, it's about figuring out the specific character of each batch.
Precisely that. An assay is basically a detailed lab report for a crude oil sample. It tells you its personality, if you will. Key things are, is it light or heavy? That's about its density, how easily it flows. Think water versus molasses. And is it sweet or sour? That's all about the sulfur content.
Sweet or sour, how does that work?
Low sulfur content means it's sweet crude. High sulfur means it's sour. Sweet crude is generally more desirable. Why? Because it's easier and cheaper to refine into products like gasoline. Less sulfur means less processing needed to clean it up. That difference really matters economically.
Got it. So it boils down to the actual molecules inside. You mentioned hydrocarbons. What are those fundamentally, and why do the differences matter so much for refining?
Right, so at its heart, crude oil is a mix of hydrocarbons. These are molecules built mainly from hydrogen and carbon atoms. But here's the cool part. Those atoms can link up in tons of different ways: chains, rings, complex structures. These arrangements form different types of hydrocarbon molecules. You get paraffins, simpler chains, aromatics, stable ring structures, naphthalene, other rings, and heavier stuff like asphalt.
And those different structures behave differently when you try to refine them.
Exactly. The structure dictates everything. Paraffins, those simpler chains, are great for making gasoline. They break down relatively easily. More complex molecules, like aromatics or the really heavy stuff, need more intensive processing. Maybe they're better suited for lubricants or asphalt or plastics feedstock. So that molecular mix, identified by the assay, tells refiners what they can make from a barrel of crude and how much effort it's going to take. It dictates the value.
Okay, that makes sense. We know what it is now, roughly. Let's talk about the industry built around it. It's massive. The source mentions vertical integration. What does that mean in the context of oil?
Vertical integration is key to understanding the big oil companies, especially historically. It basically means one company controls multiple stages of the whole process, from finding the oil in the ground all the way to selling the gasoline at the pump. This whole chain is usually broken down to three main segments: upstream, midstream, and downstream.
Okay, let's unpack those. Upstream, that sounds like the beginning.
It is. Upstream is all about exploration and production. E&P, you'll hear it called. This is the hunt for oil and gas deposits, doing the geology, the seismic surveys, and then actually drilling the wells and bringing the crude oil or natural gas to the surface. High risk, high investment, potentially high reward.
Got it. Hunting and extracting. Then midstream, getting it from A to B.
Exactly. Midstream is the transportation and storage part, moving the crude oil from the wells, maybe across land or sea, to the refineries. This involves vast networks of pipelines, huge oil tankers, rail cars, trucks, storage facilities.
Yeah.
It's the logistical backbone connecting the wells to the processing plants.
And downstream is where most of us consumers see it.
Yes. Downstream is refining the crude oil into finished products and then selling and distributing them. So refineries turning crude into gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, heating oil, lubricants, asphalt, petrochemicals for plastics. And then the marketing and distribution networks, the gas stations, the delivery trucks, getting those products to end users.
And within this whole structure, the book mentions different kinds of players. National oil companies or NOCs and the majors. What's the difference there?
That's a really important distinction. National oil companies, NOCs, are state-owned. Think Saudi Aramco, Petrobras in Brazil, Gazprom in Russia. They control the resources within their country's borders. Often their goals mix commercial interests with national ones: energy security, jobs, government revenue.
Okay, government run. And the majors.
The majors are the big, publicly traded international oil companies. ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, Chevron, Total Energies, those household names. They operate globally. They're driven primarily by profit for their shareholders, and they often bring technology and capital to projects around the world. The relationship between NOCs, who often hold most of the world's reserves, and majors, who have global reach and tech, is really central to how the whole international oil game works. Lots of partnerships, sometimes competition.
Fascinating dynamic. Okay, so let's finish by digging into that first step, the upstream part. How do we actually find and get oil out of the ground? It can't be just randomly drilling holes.
Definitely not random. It starts actually millions of years ago. You need the right ingredients. Ancient organic matter, mostly tiny marine organisms settling on seabeds. Over millions of years, they get buried deeper and deeper under layers of sediment. The heat and pressure down there slowly cooks this organic matter, transforming it into hydrocarbons, oil, and natural gas.
Okay, so it forms over geological time, but it doesn't just pool everywhere, right? You mentioned traps earlier.
Exactly. The oil and gas are lighter than the water usually present in rock pores, so they naturally want to migrate upwards. To get a commercially viable accumulation, they need to be stopped by something: a trap. This is a geological formation where an impermeable layer of rock, like shale or salt, sits above the porous reservoir rock, preventing the oil and gas from escaping further up.
Like a lid on a jar.
Sort of, yeah. These traps can form in different ways. Maybe an anticline, which is like an upward fold or dome in the rock layers, or a fault trap, where a fracture in the rock layers shifts an impermeable layer next to a reservoir layer, blocking the path. Sometimes massive underground columns of salt, called salt domes, push up and deform the surrounding rocks, creating traps around their edges. Finding these structures is key.
So how do geologists actually find these hidden traps miles underground? What's the technique?
The main tool today is seismic surveys. It's kind of like giving the Earth an ultrasound. Geologists and geophysicists send controlled sound waves, maybe from specialized trucks thumping the ground, or air guns on ships at sea down into the Earth. These sound waves bounce off the different rock layers below. By recording and analyzing the timing and strength of these returning echoes using supercomputers, they can build up detailed 3D images of the subsurface geology.
Wow. So they're looking for shapes that suggest a trap.
Precisely. They look for those anticlines, those fault structures, those specific geometries that could hold oil and gas. Once they identify a promising prospect, then comes the expensive part, drilling an exploratory well. That's the only way to know for sure if oil or gas is actually there in commercial quantities.
And if they strike oil, how does it come out? Is it always like the gushers you see in old movies?
Sometimes, initially. If there's enough natural pressure in the reservoir rock, the oil can flow to the surface on its own. That's called primary recovery. But that natural pressure doesn't last forever. It drops as you produce the oil. So often, you need to help it along. That leads to secondary recovery, usually injecting water or natural gas back into the reservoir to maintain pressure and sweep more oil towards the production wells.
And there are even more advanced ways.
Yes, and then you get into enhanced oil recovery, or EOR. These are more complex, more expensive techniques. Things like injecting steam to heat the oil and make it flow easier, or using special gases like carbon dioxide, or even chemicals to kind of wash the oil out of the rock pores. The goal is always to maximize how much of the oil originally in place you can actually recover, which might only be, 30, 60% or sometimes less, depending on the reservoir.
Wow. Okay, from those early accidental finds and the crucial shift away from whale oil to understanding the specific chemistry of crude, the way the industry is structured, and these really sophisticated methods for finding and producing it. It really has been a deep dive into the fundamentals of oil.
It really has. We've traced how this natural substance went from being a bit of a nuisance to a global powerhouse. We looked at the chemistry that makes every barrel unique, the industry structure upstream, midstream, downstream, and the amazing technology used to get it out of the ground. And I think understanding this foundation is just so critical for making sense of, well, almost everything in the modern world, from geopolitics to the economy.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? Hopefully understanding these basics, where oil comes from, what it is, how we get it, gives you a much clearer lens, a better way to view energy news, discussions about resources, even just the products you use every single day. It takes you beyond the headlines.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. We talked about how oil is finite, formed over millions of years, but we also saw how adaptable the industry has been shifting, from whale oil, developing incredible exploration tech, figuring out enhanced recovery. So, thinking ahead, given the ongoing energy transition, how might that historical adaptability continue? What forms might it take as the world looks towards different energy futures? Something to perhaps mull over.
A great point to consider. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel a little more well-informed and maybe a lot more curious about the world of oil. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into your sources. Until then, keep learning.